series of videos goes deep into the four fundamental archetypes of the mature masculine: the lover, the king, the warrior, and the magician. Each archetype gets 4 videos: the full light of what it is, the wound beneath it, the shadow it produces in men and in the world, and the final video is about the path to genuine integration. Watch in order of the videos or start wherever you feel the pull. Either works. I still recommend to watch all 4 videos at least of each archetype together. I am Luna Ora, author, priestess of the Temple of Isis and Lilith, and a woman who has spent over a decade working with men in the most honest spaces I know how to create. This series is built for all my brothers, from everything that I have witnessed in my work and beyond. I love you so much, and thank you. Let me first tell you what a real king is not. He is not the man at the top of the hierarchy. He is not the loudest voice in the room. He is not the one who takes the most, controls the most, dominates the most. He is definitely not the man who needs to be the most powerful person in every room he enters. And he absolutely is not the man who mistakes fear for respect. Those men exist everywhere. In boardrooms and government and families and spiritual communities, men with titles and authority and enormous amount of power. And almost none of them are kings. Because the king is not a position. He is a state of being. And reaching that state of being is one of the hardest things a man will ever do. Today we're going into the king archetype in its fullness. What he actually is, what he makes possible, what he gives to everyone around him, and why the world is producing a few of him. So few of him, unfortunately, and so many pale, dangerous imitations instead. Robert Moore and Douglas Gillett describe the king as the central archetype of the mature masculine. The one that gives the other 3, the lover, the warrior, and the magician, their direction, their container, their purpose. Without the king, the lover's feeling has no direction. Without the king, the warrior's strength has no wisdom. Without the king, the magician's knowledge has no integrity. The king is the archetype of order, of blessing, of centered, grounded, generative power. But I want to be very careful about how we define those words, because order, blessing, and power have all been so thoroughly distorted by their shadow expressions that we have almost lost access to what they actually mean. Order does not mean control. It does not mean the suppression of chaos or the enforcement of a hierarchy. Order, in the king sense, means the creation of conditions in which life can flourish. The ability to look at a situation, a family, a company, a community, a relationship, and perceive what is needed. What is out of alignment? What is being suppressed or ignored or distorted? And to bring clarity and structure and truth so that situation in a way, to the situation in a way that allows everything within it to become more fully itself. A real king does not make things smaller so he can feel bigger. He makes things bigger by bringing his full presence to them. Blessing is the king's most essential act. And again, not in a watered down, sentimental sense of the word. The king's blessing is an act of perception, of seeing what is actually true about a person, a situation, or a possibility, and naming it, calling it into presence, giving it the weight of real recognition. Every human being, every child, every partner, every person who works for you or looks up to you or comes to you for leadership is carrying something that needs to be seen. A potential, a truth, a quality that exists but has not yet been fully recognized. When the king sees it and names it, something happens. A person stands taller, not because they have been flattered. The king does not flatter. Flattery is cheap, and everyone knows it. But because they have been genuinely met, seen very clearly by him. And that clear seeing, that real recognition, is one of the most powerful forces for human transformation that exists. Power for the king is not something he takes. It is something he holds in service of what he leads, in service of life itself. This is the crucial distinction, and it is the one that separates the real king from every shadow expression. The tyrant uses power to serve himself. The king uses power to serve what he loves. In the tradition that I carry, the temple of Isis and Lilith, the king was never separate from the sacred. Kingship was not a political arrangement. It was a spiritual one. The king was understood to be the living embodiment of the masculine principle in its most developed form, the force that brought order to chaos, that protected what was sacred, that held the boundary between the known and the unknown so that life within the kingdom could unfold without being destroyed by what lay outside of it. And crucially, the king derived his authority not from himself, but from his relationship to something greater than himself, to the divine, especially to the feminine principle, to the land, to nature, to the ancestors, to the future generations whose lives his decisions would shape. In many ancient traditions, the king was initiated by the feminine, the priestess, the oracle, the sacred feminine presence that could see clearly whether a man was truly ready or to hold power, or whether he was simply hungry for it. Because hunger for power is not the same as readiness for it. And a man who is hungry for power, who needs it, who is running towards it to fill something that has not been filled inside of him first, will always eventually become the tyrant. The man who is ready for power is often the man who has least sought it. The man who has faced himself honestly enough to know both his capacity and his limitation. He holds power not because it completes him, but because he is genuinely the right vessel for what needs to be done. He takes ownership and responsibility. That man, the feminine can recognize and the masculine can trust, is the real king. And the world has almost forgotten what he looks like. I want to spend some time here because it is essential and almost entirely absent from most discussion of the king archetype. The king does not dominate the feminine. This is crucial to understand. A real king, the integrated king, recognizes the feminine as his sacred counterpart, not his possession, not his subordinate, not the thing that serves his kingdom. Absolutely not. In fact, he knows he serves her. She is his equal. She is his mirror. She is the force without which his own power cannot be fully expressed or rightly directed, and he knows that. In the ancient traditions, the king and the queen, the masculine and the feminine principle, in their highest expressions, were understood to be in relationship of profound mutual dependence. And I'm not talking about the known history, the fake, the lies that we've been told. I'm talking about the real devotion of a sacred union that our history books, his storybooks, have made us forget and deleted. The king brought order, protection, and clear direction. The feminine brought wisdom, depth, the long view, the connection to what was sacred and alive. Neither was complete without the other. Now, the tyrant king, which is what patriarchy has largely produced, severed that relationship. He made the feminine subordinate. He reduced her to a function, to the bearing of hairs, the bearing of children, the management of the household, the provision of comfort and beauty in service of the masculine agenda. And in doing so, he cut himself off from the very wisdom and power that would have kept his power from becoming destructive. This is why every unchecked male power structure eventually collapses or corrupts. Not because power itself is corrupting, but because power without the feminine mirror, without truth, without the quality of perception and depth and true wisdom and relational wisdom the feminine brings, it loses contact with reality, with the living, breathing, complex truth of what it is actually doing to the people it is meant to serve. A real king does not fear the feminine. On the contrary, he does not need to control her or diminish her or keep her submissive. He needs her. He seeks her counsel. He builds structures that allow the feminine to speak honestly, freely, without fear of punishment, because he understands that the feminine perception of his leadership is one of the most accurate measures of whether his power is serving life or destroying it. That is a very different relationship to the feminine that most men in power have even been shown. And it is one of the most radical and necessary things that the king archetype offers to the world right now. Now I want to talk about how the king relates to the lover, the warrior, and the magician, because the king does not replace the other archetypes. He integrates them. He gives them their highest expression. Let's talk about the king and the lover. The king gives the lovers feeling, direction, and container. Without the king, the lover's desire scatters into addiction, into creative chaos, into the endless pursuit of sensation without purpose. The king asks, what is this feeling in service of? What does this desire want to build? Where should this love be directed? He transforms the lover's aliveness into devotion with a purpose. The king and the warrior. The king gives the warrior's strength its moral dimension. Without the king, the warrior's discipline and aggression have no wisdom. They become violence in service of nothing or in service of the ego. The king asks, what are we fighting for? What are we protecting? What is worth the cost of this battle? He transforms the warrior's force into integrity. The king and the magician. The king gives the magician's knowledge its ethical container. Without the king, the magician's power can become manipulation, the use of knowledge and insight for private gain rather than collective good. The king asks, how do we use what we know in service of life? He transforms the magician's intelligence into wisdom, and in return, the king needs all three as well. Without the lover, he becomes cold, a manager of systems rather than a servant of life. Without the warrior, the king becomes passive, unable to hold his ground, unable to protect what he loves, unable to enforce the order his clarity perceives. Without the magician, the king becomes rigid, unable to see beneath the surface, unable to understand the deeper forces at work in the situations he is called to lead. The full king is the man who has integrated all four archetypes, who feels deeply and acts decisively, who can be tender and fierce, who understands the mystery and speaks the truth, who serves something greater than himself with the full force of everything he is. That man is extraordinarily rare and extraordinarily necessary. So why do most men never get there? 3 reasons, and they mirror almost exactly what we spoke about with the lover. The first is the father wound. The king is the archetype most directly shaped by a man's earliest experience of masculine authority. What his father was or was not. Whether he witnessed a real king or a tyrant or a weakling. Whether he received the blessing, the clear, grounded recognition of his worth and his potential that only a king can give. I'm going to go very deep into this in the next video, but briefly, a man cannot embody what he has never witnessed, and most men were never given a real king to learn from. The second is the confusion of power with dominance. The culture most men were raised in taught them that power means control, that leadership means being the strongest, the loudest, the most dominant, that a real man takes what he wants and does not apologize for it. This is the tyrant's logic, and it is so pervasive, so normalized, so deeply embedded in our institutions and our media and our models of success that most men mistake the shadow for the real thing. They pursue the tyrant's version of the king and wonder why, even when they achieve it, something essential remains missing. The third, and something I speak about often, is the absence of initiation. The king, like the lover, cannot be reached through information or ambition or the accumulation of external success. He requires a descent. A man must face what he is running from, his wound, his shadow, his fear of his own power and his own limitations, and come through it. He must be held accountable for something greater than his own ego. He must be witnessed by other men and by the feminine, by life itself, in his full truth. Not his performance and his shadow, but his truth. And on the other side of that confrontation, the king becomes available, not as a role he plays, but as a reality that he inhabits. Now, I want to end with this because I think it is the most important thing I will say in this video. The absence of real kings is not a personal problem. It is a civilizational crisis. Look at the world right now, at the men in positions of greatest power and authority. They have been in this power for a very long time. In governments, in corporations, in religious institutions, in media, in the structures that shape the conditions of human life in this planet. How many of them are real kings? How many are genuinely in service of something greater than themselves? Genuinely capable of holding power with an open hand? Genuinely willing to be questioned, challenged, corrected by the feminine, by their people, by the reality of what their decisions are actually producing? And how many are tyrants wearing the king's crown? Many whose power is in service of their own wound. Those leaderships whose leadership is organized around the protection of their ego, whose relationship to the people they lead is fundamentally extractive, taking what they need and calling it governance, calling it business, calling it God's will. The tyrant kings have built the world we are living in, the hell we are living in, and the weakling kings have let them. Because the other failure of the uninitiated masculine is not the man who grasps for power. It is the man who refuses it and does nothing, who abdicates, who sees what needs to be done and does not do it because doing it would require standing for something. And standing for something requires the courage to be opposed, to be wrong, to be held responsible for the consequences of his choices. The weakling king is everywhere too. In the father who will not set limits because he needs his children to like him. In the father who never sees his children at all, who never even wants to raise them. In the leader who will not make the difficult decision because he needs consensus. In the man who sees injustice and says nothing because saying something would cost him something. Both are failures. The tyrant and the weakling are the result of the same thing. A man who has not faced himself. A man who has not been initiated into real responsibilities and the real limitations of power. Who has not been brought to his knees by something true and discovered in that humility what he is actually for. The world is starving and really needs real kings. Not men who take the throne, men who earn it from the inside out through the willingness to face what is true about themselves and to let that truth reshape them into something that people around them can actually trust. That man changes everything he touches, and we need him now more than ever. I appreciate you guys. In the next video, we're going to go deep into the father wound, the specific psychological inheritance that shapes whether a man becomes a real king or collapses into the tyrant or the weakling. Because you cannot build what was never modeled for you without first understanding what was given to you instead. If this landed, share this with a man who is ready to stop performing power and start embodying it. We all know at least one man in our life that we see the potential of being a real king. I will see you in the next one. Please subscribe, like, and share so I can continue making these videos and share the work of the temple. And may the goddess bless you all.
is where the goddess lies. My womb remembers every name, every king who knelt in prayer. I am not yours to tame, I am the flame you're dying to bear.